Today it's all about, what can my data center do to support your IT infrastructure? And our end users are talking about the GPUs and the HPC and the high density deployments. And on the other side, the cloud providers are talking about, I need more space, and I'm gonna adapt this new generation, you know, GPU as a service, right? In the cloud space. So everybody is jumping onto those bandwagons. So it's a very interesting time, and we have been saying this is the best time to be in the data center industry from past decade, right? Every year we had to repeat that this is the best time to, because it's growing so rapidly. Hi, I'm Viggy Hegde. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Compu Dynamics. I live in Northern Virginia, the Data Center Alley. You're watching Data Center Go to Market podcast. Thanks for watching.
Hello, it's Joshua Feinberg from the Data Center Go to Market podcast, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming a very special guest here with me today. I'm welcoming Viggy Hegde from Compu Dynamics. He's the Vice President of Marketing, and he's based in Virginia. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for agreeing to come on and share your decades of wisdom in and around the data center ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but happy to share, what I've learned so far, and then if you want me to give you a little, background about myself and what I've done so far in my career it's kind of fascinating.
That's a great place to start. Yeah, can you walk us through how you ended up in your current role? Was this always something that you knew you wanted to do when you were in school, when you're growing up, or was there something along the way that set you on this path of now becoming so experienced, such a veteran presence in the data center ecosystem?
Sure, happy to. Like I said, my name is Viggy Hegde. Been in the marketing space for over 20 years. Interesting enough, when you ask that question about growing up, the inspiration and the aspirations of being a marketer, it's an interesting combination. I did my bachelor's in applied art in marketing specialization, and then later I did my MBA in information technology. So it's kind of it's not necessarily in the same space, but that was very interesting. And then I jumped onto the IT wagon back early 2000, and worked in a variety, pretty much all areas of marketing. We use the term marketing very loosely, but each functional area of a marketing department could be its own department. So I worked in pretty much all space from corporate communication, Marcom, to demand generation, digital marketing, and marketing operations. And worked in a variety of companies, from high growth SaaS companies to Fortune 100. And interesting enough, last 15 or so years of my career has been very closely tied to the data center industry, specifically in colocation, hyperscale, cloud, and interconnection. And most recently, I moved to, as you mentioned, to Compu Dynamics as their VP and head of marketing. Compu Dynamics is a market leader in design, build, and maintain the critical infrastructure for data centers across the country. So this is an interesting move for me because I've been part of the data center providers. Now I'm on the other side of the fence, where Compu Dynamics provides service to data centers, and we are a very critical component in making a data center a data center. So this is what a really interesting shift, and was really exciting for me. And it's becoming even more important in the age of AI, where the traditional data centers need to convert them, or the modern data center needs to be built to support the requirement of really high density GPUs and HPUs, HPCs, to support the AI deployments.
So it's really interesting about that as making the switch from being on the operator side to being a company that's in the design and build space, because you hear about this in other kind of industries from time to time. Early on in my career, I worked on doing IT support on Wall Street, and you hear every once in a while people making the switch from the sell side to the buy side. In SaaS and infrastructure, you sometimes hear of people leaving working for an agency and going to go in-house. Sometimes happens with big four accounting firms, where they'll go from working in public accounting to taking a job, but you don't hear about it that often in the data center industry.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. It's all about the market dynamics, right? I mean, if we, people, for a long time, there was no major shift in data center space. You have been in this space for long enough, so you know this too. When I started my career in the data center exclusive around like 2008, 2010 timeframe, it was colocation, and pretty much people were trying space and power. That's the core to sell, and that's pretty much what we marketers promoted: space, power, network, cooling. That's what, and there's only so much room for you to be kind of do innovative things in that space. Yes, we at the company that I used to work, NTT, back then, we had several patents on our electrical infrastructure with 2N+2. That means it's kind of, we offered double the redundancy you need for your data center, right? So if power feed goes off, the other picks up. That fails, something else picks up. So twice as much redundancy as you wanted. But guess what? Over a period of time, people don't really care about the data center redundancy itself. People think that's an overhead. Why should I pay so much for those super sophisticated redundancy infrastructure where my applications can take care of themselves with failovers, setups, right? So if my application fails here, it can move to another, and end users won't even realize it. So that's a kind of a major shift. But in the age of AI, that's where it completely changed in the last 3, 4, 5 years. A day and night between what data center providers, operators were thinking as their core competency. Today, it's all about what can my data center do to support your IT infrastructure? And our end users are talking about the GPUs and the HPC and the high density deployments. And on the other side, the cloud providers are talking about, I need more space, and I'm gonna adapt this new generation, GPU as a service, right? In the cloud space. So everybody is jumping onto those bandwagons. So it's a very interesting time, and we have been saying this is the best time to be in the data center industry from past decade, right? Every year we had to repeat that this is the best time to, because it's growing so rapidly, and companies like Compu Dynamics, which is the integral part of this whole growth, is growing exponentially. It's good for everybody. It's good for people who work in this industry. It's good for the end users. It's good for the community. That's the best part. I don't want to deviate too much into what this industry is contributing to the human life and our everyday life, the communities where we live and enjoy our lives. But it's a big part of it.
And what's super fascinating about that is around the time I started hanging around in this space in the early 2010s, I saw a lot of managed service providers facing commoditization and struggling to reinvent themselves as the world was moving from on-premise and client server to SaaS and public cloud. And around that time, probably by the mid-2010s, I saw a lot of the hosting companies becoming commoditized. I see a little bit of that going on with a lot of legacy single location colocation operators that haven't upgraded and haven't really tried to figure out how they're going to fit into this GPU centric, much more high density world. But there's so many constraints around grid capacity. I feel like the market's going to sort that out at some point as well. and maybe some of the legacy co-location operators become valuable for edge capacity. Hard to know for sure, but there's a lot of interesting dynamics at place in the marketplace.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Viggy, so you're at this stage in your career where you're in a place where, imagine a lot of younger folks that are early on trying to figure out what they want to do. Maybe they're still in high school, or some of them are in college, or they come to someone like yourself. Maybe it's a neighbor or a son or daughter of a family member or coworker, and they're curious. They've heard about digital infrastructure. Data centers are in mainstream media a lot more lately than they have in the past few years. They don't really want to go into something technical. They don't want to go into engineering or software development, but they're curious about all these client-facing roles across marketing, sales, customer success, products. What advice would you give to someone in that situation that's exploring this and wants to get together for coffee and learn a little bit more about what it's like working in the data center industry?
Yeah. Again, I'm not an expert to give career advice, but I can share my own experience, right? I mean, it's a kind of real life example too. Few things I want to call out. One is, marketing in the data center industry or data center buyers is not exactly the same as you would do in a traditional marketing environment, because the buying process or the buying cycle in the data center space is very similar to a home buying experience, right? So this is a very fascinating industry, and I get really kind of get too many ideas when I visit a data center or work in a data center space. Is because this is the only space where you can touch and feel technology. It's a home in a way for the cloud infrastructure we're talking about, the servers and the networking gears, everything. So this is what differentiates a data center from the traditional marketing in terms of a SaaS application or anything else, right? This is a commercial real estate for computing infrastructure. So technology lives and breathes inside a data center. So you had to look at your marketing tactics and strategy differently than what people normally do in other space when they are dealing with data center buyers. There's no secret sauce to kind of make this a success, right? Because smaller co-location providers, they still follow the same commoditized approach where they are selling. Even today, they're selling, and there's demand for it too. The racks and the cages, right? Whereas the hyperscale providers, like Digital Realty, NTT, and other companies that are leading the space, they use a different tactic altogether, right? It's more of a relationship base. It's all about making that capacity available when the end users are ready to buy. In the modern age of AI, I briefly touched on this. It's all about making the data center the AI ready, right? So buyers are really looking for, is your data center capable of handling the high density deployments I'm looking for? Do you offer liquid cooling? Do you have the growth plan from, if you have one data center today, 10 data centers today, what's your 3, 5, 10 years roadmap looks like? Because they want to make sure that they have room to grow, and if in a market where they want to grow, right? So does your growth roadmap aligns with their growth strategy? So all this is really complex, because it's not about selling a piece of property or renting one data hall or a portion of it to a customer. So it's kind of you had to really think from that perspective. In terms of other customer facing, this is a greatest opportunity for people who don't want to go into more of the technical engineering or other disciplines in their studies. If they want to kind of really become, let's say, a technician, we are fortunate to have a lot of the educational institutes embrace this new opportunity. I'll use Northern Virginia Community College as an example. They offer a dedicated data center technician course. It's a full, certification, and there are more than a couple hundred students enrolled in the last few years. And some really good friends of mine, they are part of building this whole curriculum and the course. And in fact, people are so grateful that courses like this, education like this, is really helping the industry by filling the shortage of really skilled technical labor requirements, right? So if I'm a hyperscale provider or even a hyperscale data center provider, I need a lot of skilled technicians to maintain my facility. If I own my own data center, I need those technicians to run it. If I'm a data center provider, I need somebody who understands my end users' requirements and their setup, so that they can talk the same language. So having this kind of skill set is really important. And the courses that NOVA offers, Northern Virginia Community College, this is a great example. And I'm already seeing many other institutes and universities, they are embracing it. And in the near future, I'll not be surprised if that becomes a mainstream courses offered by leading universities.
Yeah, what Northern Virginia Community College is doing is actually still novel enough that if they were a private university as a public university, I wouldn't be surprised if they would be looking to set up satellites all over the US, at least in the 5 or 10 biggest data center markets, because there's such extreme, obviously there's more density, more square footage, more power and everything in Northern Virginia than anywhere else on the planet. But you still have, there's a program in Dallas. I'm not aware of any similar programs in other in Chicago and Northern Southern California, let alone the secondary data center markets. And there's clearly a demand for this kind of skills training going forward, and even awareness. That's why like Nomad Futurist was doing is fantastic for just spreading the word and letting people know that these careers exist. But yeah, for sure, this is all great insight and advice for getting foundational skills. And one of the interesting topics that comes up in a lot of these interviews with folks on the sales side, like account executive, sales development, is increasingly, in order for them to get to really valuable conversations with prospects and clients, they're having to be a lot more technical than they would have had to be 5 or 10 years ago. I did an interview with somebody back 8 or 10 weeks ago where he was describing his home lab setup, what he does nights and weekends. I said, it sounds like you have the skills that you could be a fractional CTO to small and medium-sized businesses. He's like, exactly, that's what I'm trying to do. So our clients see that much value in having these conversations. So it sounds like, based on what you're describing, even if somebody wants to go into account executive training or marketing training or account management training, they would be really wise to start with the foundation of learning what a data center technician does.
I can't agree more.
Yeah, cool. So what about someone who is more mid-career? Maybe it's someone that you worked with 10, 12 years ago that you bump into at a conference, and they are like, Viggy, it's really cool to see what you've done in your career. I know we worked together briefly many years ago, kind of hit a roadblock. I'm a little stressed out, a little bit burned out, trying to figure out what I should do next. What advice would you give to someone that wants to stay in a client-facing role in digital infrastructure and is kind of a little bit lost and looking for some peer advice, a little bit of mentoring to get back on track?
Yeah, this is a very important element, right? I think this is the crux of our conversation. What we are having today. Gone are those days where you're selling a commodity, especially in the data center space. And then we briefly touched on that, right? It's today it's all about the ecosystem. Our end users are not buying a data center because they want to buy a data center. They buy data center space to solve their holistic IT challenges. And that's not just, deploying some servers in a data center environment. It's all about, how this application, I need to make sure that it's deployed in a space where it can perform the way it's supposed to. It has connectivity to scale up or down. It has the network infrastructure built in so that there's no latency for my end users. So there's so much more than just selling or marketing a rack and the typical commodity-based colo selling. So if you are in this space and have experience in data center industry in general, it's time to kind of revisit, rethink how you can solve the IT challenges of your end users, right? So it's having that knowledge of how this whole ecosystem works, how cloud providers can be part of your core colo facility, how network providers can be part of your ecosystem, and how the modern or the cutting edge, I should say cutting edge infrastructure can enable your data centers to be the AI ready data centers. What you can do to kind of convert your data center or build a data center that's designed for high density deployments. So at Flexential, when I was VP of Marketing Operations there, the company took a really interesting turn to, offer Flex Anywhere solution. It's a very interesting, initiative. That's because end users are not necessarily, looking at one solution from a colo providers. So if they want to partner with you, you should offer them that platform to grow with that as their business grows, right? It's not just, I'm solving today's problem. People are looking at 5, 6, 10 years roadmaps. So is you as an infrastructure provider, are you capable of solving and providing that support to your end users? So that's what experienced professionals need to think about. What I've been doing, what I'm doing, and what I should be doing moving forward, because the industry is changing. It's going through a major transformation, and it's time for us to kind of rethink, reimagine what we are doing.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
So this plays into this general trend that I've been observing for a while, that client-facing, especially the account executives and sales development and account managers, need to be seen more like consultants, like Big Four kind of advisors, rather than just focused on selling and servicing clients on a very transaction-focused, where their interactions should feel so valuable that prospects and clients want to spend time with them, as opposed to them having to chase and nag and beg and manipulate to get these meetings to actually happen, where it's the other way around, where they feel like their account executive or their account manager provides so much valuable insight about how other companies like theirs are exploring infrastructure that they want to have these conversations with them.
100%. It's spot on.
So then the challenge is, what can the company do from a learning and development and professional development perspective to, one, have a uniform base of knowledge and continuing to help encourage and facilitate people to upskill so they can deliver at that kind of value?
Right.
Viggy, when you look at what's going on across the entire industry, considering the operators, technology companies, facilities, construction, real estate investors, what do you see as the biggest mistake or the biggest gap in marketing that you think other companies should be thinking about a little differently going forward?
Yeah, so it touches on pretty much all the aspects that we talked about earlier. It's not about what you offer. It's all about what your buyers really need, right? Because, there's so much challenges with power, and we as data center industry professionals, we hear this experiences every single day. Northern Virginia, where I live, is called the data center alley, and just from a in comparison, more than 70% of the internet traffic goes through Ashburn. So that's fascinating, right? And that's why this is called as data center alley. And the most dense data center population in the entire world. If I step out, I see a lot of really large secure buildings, building after building after building, and then I see a bigger campus, right? So there's so much happening, and people are kind of really pushing back, saying, yeah, this is creating a lot of problem for our daily lives. So that's a bigger challenge. And then we as marketers and industry professionals, it's our responsibility to kind of keep educating people about how data centers are part of this, the critical infrastructure ecosystem, which is, things like 911. People rely on it. That's why it's such a critical, component of everybody's life. Without data centers, they 911 probably won't function in a most efficient way it should be, right? So that's just one example, and how data centers are really contributing to the revenue of each county, which literally translates to lower property tax that we all pay, right? There's so much advantage. Then the power constraints. Right, it's Northern Virginia is a good example, and it's we are seeing this across the country, and that's why data center providers as well as hyperscalers and everyone else, the end users, enterprises, they are looking at other markets to kind of grow, where they don't want to pay a premium price because there's a power shortage. At the same time, they don't want to go into a location where it's not power is cheap, but it's the overall infrastructure is not ready for a data center deployment. But that's changing. Some of the tier 2 market, when I started my career in this industry, are now booming, because the tier 1 market that we talked about, Northern Virginia is a great example. Silicon Valley on the other end is another great example where space is not available, power is not available. Then now what's the alternative? The secondary markets are picking up. They're coming to the mainstream. Atlanta is a great example, and other Hillsborough. It's not that a lot of analysts say that's going to be the next Ashburn, right? There's so much happening in Hillsborough. So in general, I think the challenges is bound to, we all will have to face it. It's bound to happen. But what can we do in terms of address it, in terms of changing dynamics of the industry, and then also the needs of end users. I heard somebody talk about each rack in the future, near future, I should not say future, near future, where we used to talk about 4 kW, 5 kW, 6 kW per rack 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Now, people are talking about each rack can support probably a megawatt with sophisticated liquid cooling and immersion cooling and all the modern technologies that we are already starting to see, and people are using it extensively. That's not just a fictional thing; it's happening, right? So we were talking about if I have a big data center, and if all I'm deploying there are a megawatt rack, if I have a 36 megawatt data center, just by deploying 36 racks in that facility, I'm done with my power, right? So is this notion of a really large scale 300,000 square foot, 500,000 square foot building, is that a need in the future when we are talking about higher density? Or is it changing? Are the data centers going to be smaller? So it kind of it's makes me really wonder whether the stuff that we have been doing so far, is that really going to be the future, right? So as marketers, as industry experts and leaders, we had to kind of really reimagine how we have been selling, how have been helping our customers and educating the community, because it's changing and it's changing rapidly.
What struck me as especially poignant with this whole idea is that the nature of where the locations is going to shift because of grid capacity issues and communities pushing back. But it sounds a lot like marketers needing to get closer to their end customers to understand what the end customers really want, and being prepared that how they define their addressable market, how they define the client profile, who they're actually creating content and events and doing this education for, is going to change over time. And the challenge that I always see disproportionately with smaller companies is trying to figure out a way to be present in the full journey, because by default, it's extremely unusual that I'll encounter a company with less than 50 or 100 employees with less than a couple of marketers internally that really seems to be showing up well when in the awareness and consideration stages. And really, a best case scenario, maybe they're doing a passable job with product marketing on the website and they're still depending on a lot of offline. So I see those as huge challenges, but I also see that most of the much more established companies that have the resources to have more breadth on their marketing teams seem to be doing anywhere from a good job to an exceptional job on this space. But yeah, it seems like a big period of time where there's going to be some significant haves and have-nots based on who can bridge this whole gap.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. And also, you touched on two components about resources on each of these teams, right? Whether it's marketing or sales side, go to market in general. It depends on the solutions that you offer, right? If you are talking about less number of targets, if you are only selling to hyperscale customers, let's take that as an example, right? There are only probably a dozen or so buyers for your service. Do you need 100 member, 100 team, 100 marketers on your marketing team? Maybe not, because you have a very hyper-focused, limited number of customers. And you probably don't need that many people, but you need a strategy to kind of constantly engage with those limited number of targets that you have, and stay in front of them, because they want to buy wherever the capacity is available, right? As long as it aligns with their requirements and their needs and their growth plans. So keeping in front of them, engaging with them, that's fundamentally what it is all about. It's not about how many people you need on the marketing team. It's about how well you can stay in touch with your end users, the buyers, if you're targeting, or if you're catering to a wider range of buyers, more like a colo and a little bit of wholesale model versus 100% hyperscale only business model. It's two different strategies there. So it's never going to be, and it's never been that way, and one size fits all, right? It's that you apply the right model for you. And I know in our own space, some really good friends of mine work in the hyperscale part and the traditional retail colocation part. Some of them just have like a handful of marketing folks on their team. They're doing extremely well, and they're making the same numbers as other companies with 30, 40, 50, 100 people on their team.
Yeah. It brings up to the point of unit economics driving what a resource constrained company can afford to invest in. There's a world of difference between what you can afford to staff up across the full go-to-market when you're selling retail colocation for a few $100s a month versus 7- and 8-figure hyperscale deals. And I think what happens a lot of times is people look to emulate others that they see in the marketplace without figuring out how it contextually makes sense for all of them. So getting the unit economics right and then you have this whole self-propelled buyer's journey now, where people are more allergic than ever to spending time with sales teams until they're very, very far along. And I don't remember whether Gartner or Forrester or someone else with the 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. It's a lot of coverage and a lot of surface area for companies that have historically not been really into content marketing or buyer personas or good lead nurturing or thought leadership or any of these concepts that now seem to be more important than ever.
Absolutely.
Viggy, when you think about where this profession is headed in the coming years, if you look into your crystal ball 2, 3, 4 years out, how do you think the role of a marketer or marketing team supporting different kinds of internal and external stakeholders is going to change in the coming years?
Man,
what does the future look like?
It's a $1 million question, because this industry, it's changing so rapidly. It's because it's so hard to even predict what it's going to be, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, let alone in the future, like 10 years down the line, right? It's almost impossible, because generative AI, as an example, is taking over. It's literally happening, and if you haven't embraced it, you're falling behind, right? So our industry in general, it's fundamentally, that's where data center is right in the middle of making it all happen. There's generative AI or the big data analytics, everything that we are talking about, autonomous cars as an example, right? And it's very kind of hard to predict at this stage about what this industry is going to be 5 years down the line. But as marketers, one thing is for sure: if we are doing the same thing that we are doing 10 years ago, it's not going to work in the future. Because ultimately, two things are kind of fundamentally driving the market demand. One is a change in this overall ecosystem. Number two, the growth in the market. When I say growth, I'm talking about expansion into area that we never thought is going to be a data center market, right? So having that visibility and staying, very well versed with, how things are changing, that's fundamentally the secret sauce for any marketing professional, right? They need to know where the industry is going. They need to know where the constraints are. They need to know what our end users are looking for today, tomorrow, and 5 years down the line. And start to kind of, tune your marketing efforts in that direction, so that, you you're filling up your top of the funnel to educate the community that's looking for your solution. And then when they are in the market to buy your solution, you're already, ahead of the curve. You already engaged with them. You already kind of established your awareness, and you already told the market what you are capable of doing, right? So when the buyers are ready to buy, boom, you're right in front of them. So that's fundamentally the major shift of what we have done in the past versus what we should be doing in the future.
So 10 years ago, it may have been a nice to have to arrive super early and to plant the seeds and help frame the criteria that they use to evaluate all the other options and continue to stay with them. Now it seems like if you don't do that, you're really at a huge disadvantage. You probably won't be on the short list at all and may put yourself in a place where you're shrinking market share, losing deals, and the only way that things are closing at all is by having to sacrifice margin, which is a downward financial spiral for morale and the whole company's financial health and viability.
Exactly. And if you try to say your data center is AI ready today, you are late to the game, right? Because the revolution has already started. It's already in motion, right? So if you start saying, yeah, my data center is AI ready, or we are building AI ready data center, you are far behind. So that's just as an example.
Yeah, it's the same way I sometimes have people come to me and they're like, we'll get to LinkedIn and we'll get to doing all webinars and things like that. We're going to do that next year. I'm like, you really don't have time to keep kicking this down the field, because everyone that you compete against in this space, even the late adopters, have been at this 5 or 10 years. The early adopters have been at LinkedIn and YouTube and webinars for at least 10 years at this point.
That's correct. Yeah, exactly.
It's all part of the competitive playbook. Viggy, this has been super informative. I really appreciate you sharing so generously all the experience that you've accumulated over the years working for Colocation, hyperscale operators, and now going over into the design build side of the industry. It's been super insightful. If someone wants to learn more about what you're working on, wants to follow what you're doing, wants to connect, is LinkedIn a good channel to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Connect me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and thoughts here.
That's awesome. And if they want to learn more about Compu Dynamics, is the website the best place to go? Do you have any suggested resources?
Absolutely. Yeah. Go to compu-dynamics.com. That's our corporate website. Yeah, you can also follow us on LinkedIn, Compu Dynamics on LinkedIn. We are completely kind of re-energizing our motion to kind of be in that bandwagon. Right, Compu Dynamics, there's some really amazing deployments, and when I joined the company, it was fascinating to see how they're ahead of the curve and deployed some of the most sophisticated liquid cooling technology, immersion deployments, and these are not 1 or 2 racks. These are like megawatts after megawatts and 15, 20, 40 megawatts deployments with liquid cooling infrastructure. It's fascinating to see those actual pictures and videos of how it's done, and then we have some amazing thought leaders, decades of experience doing this. So it's a great company, and if anybody wants to wants to learn the art of the possible, maybe it's worth having a conversation with those industry experts.
What's super cool about this too is it started, I think, more in SaaS 5 or 10 years ago, the concept of the modern marketing team looking more like a media company for their most important buyer personas. But when you talk about all these great things that you're doing at Compu Dynamics, 10, 15 years ago, the media, the trade publications were primarily the ones who got the word out about this. Now, increasingly, you can lean on some of those other trusted partners and media outlets, but there's no reason why you also can't get your subject matter experts out front and center on a regular basis in the marketplace. So yeah, it's a really exciting time across the board in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. And that's, again, I started with, this is the best time to be in the data center industry. And probably we will continue to say this for decades to come.
That's terrific. Thanks again, Viggy. I've been speaking with Viggy Hegde from Compu Dynamics. He's the vice president of marketing based in Northern Virginia. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me again. Bye for now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.